Hey, welcome to the investor.bet NRL round 22 betting trends preview. In this video, I'm going to run through and break down all 8 games coming up this weekend in the NRL. We're going to look at the historical betting trends, the recent matchups between each of these teams' games. We'll also look at what they've been doing recently, go through some of the stats, and just give you an overview of the information you need to make the best betting decisions to profit this weekend. It's been a pretty long season so far, still plenty of good games coming up. The race to the finals is definitely on and determining where these teams will end up sitting come week 1 of the finals. Before we get into this weekend's games and go through all of that, I want to quickly recap what happened last week. Started on Thursday night, the Storm just beating the Roosters 34-30 in a game that went back and forth multiple times. The Cowboys in the early game on Friday night beat the Dragons up in Townsville 38-32. Cowboys led throughout. Dragons kept bridging the margin, but couldn't quite get over the line. Eels beat the Broncos 22-20 in the first upset of the round. That was backed up by the Titans beating the Warriors 24-16 over in New Zealand. The Panthers beat the Tigers 36-2. Sharks beat the Rabbitohs 14-12 on Saturday night. Then on Sunday, a couple of blowouts. The Raiders 44-18 over the Knights, and the Bulldogs 42-4 over the Seagulls. I'm really glad that I changed my thoughts on this game when I went back through it in depth. I really started to see how this was going to be a letdown game for the Seagulls, which it was. So I'm glad I ended the round on that with the Bulldogs winning, as opposed to trusting in the Seagulls off that win over Melbourne. And that's something you definitely got to be cautious of when teams beat up on one of the better teams, how they come through that game, because it can have poor effects on teams, that's for sure. The round started with a number of close games. So the first 4 games were decided by 8 or less. We also had the Sharks game decided by 2 points, and then 3 of the last 4 games being decided by at least 26 points. Home teams won 4 games, away teams won 4 games, but the home sides covered the spread in 6 of the 8 games, and that's continued the trend on the season. Home teams have covered the handicap 91 times, and the away teams only covered 65 times. The Eels against the Broncos and the Titans against the Warriors were the only away teams to cover, which coincidentally were the only 2 underdogs to win their games outright. Favorites won 6 of the 8 games. The favorites covered the spread in 4 of 8 games, so 50-50 split there. This season, underdogs are 84-72 against the spread, and that trend of home underdogs has certainly continued as well, with the Roosters against the Melbourne Storm and the Rabbitohs against the Sharks being the other 2 underdogs outside the Eels and Titans who covered. 4 games went over, 4 games went under the total. This season, overall, 85 games have gone under, 71 games have gone over. And one thing, if you break this down further, which if you're in the NRL bet finders, you'll already have seen, is majority of the games that are going under are when the home team is the underdog on the handicap. That's the situation that's causing the divide in how many games are going over and how many games are going, and the more games going under. So definitely keep that in mind. Just be cautious. When you see the away team's favorite, or obviously the home team's the underdog, then just be cautious of that being a high scoring game and lean more so towards there being unders when you then also combine that with the other stats, which we're going to go through. Now, looking ahead to this weekend's games, over a few really interesting games that are going to have interesting effects. So we're going to go through those. Some of the important games coming up: Warriors versus Dolphins. That's definitely an important one for both of those sides. Then Seagulls versus Roosters. You can see 9th versus 10th playing each other this week. And also the Sharks versus Cowboys. You got 7th versus 11th. More so an important game for the Sharks based on where they're sitting, playing at home this week. With the latter, Raiders a game clear of the Bulldogs, who are a game clear of the Storm, who are a game clear of the Warriors. So there's quite a bit of room between the top 4 right now. The Warriors are a game and a half clear of the Panthers, who are now into $5 to win the premiership. Broncos, Sharks both tied on 26 points, and then Dolphins and Seagulls on 24 points, and the Roosters, the only other team still in the hunt, on 22 points, but I'm going to have to finish the season very strongly, starting with this game against the Seagulls. But we're going to run through each matchup and break this down, starting with the Eels against the Melbourne Storm. Melbourne, they are $1.31 favorites, minus 10.5, and the total for this matchup is 48.5. Storm have won and covered the past 5 against Parramatta, and they've also won the past 4 in a row by at least 18 points. Now, you might remember the last time these sides met, it was round 1 this season in Melbourne, and the Storm, as $1.09 favourites, won 56 points to 18. We have a look back at what happened there. The Storm scored 10 tries to 3. They scored 8 of those 10 tries in the first half to lead 46-6 at halftime. Both teams getting the 2 tries in the second half. The Eels, 2 of their tries coming in that final 12 minutes or so of the game. Xavier Coates and Ryan Pappenhausen both got doubles, and then the Storm had 8 individual try scorers. Possession was fairly even, but 9-3 line breaks in favour of Melbourne. They also broke 41 tackles. So a pretty poor defensive display by the Eels. They only made 285 tackles, but missed 41 and had 28 ineffective. That gives them a 80.5% effective tackle percentage, which generally that number to be definitely in the high 80s to be competitive, particularly against a Melbourne Storm side in Melbourne in an afternoon game. But obviously, big margin there. Prior to that, last season, the Storm won in Sydney 32-14, which is a similar matchup here. And the Storm are only $1.08 there. They are without Jerome Hughes for this game. I'm not sure if Cam Munster will be returning for this game. I would say yes, but we'll wait and see once lineups come out later today. But expect the Storm to win. I really can't see them dropping this game. They've won 7 of their last 8. Haven't been covering the spread though, so just be a little bit cautious with the minus 10.5. And they are also on a back-to-back road game situation after playing in Sydney last week against the Roosters, but have had the full 7 days rest, where the Eels are on a 1-day rest disadvantage. Storm, 3 of their last 5 wins have also come by 6 or less points. They did blow out the Knights by 18 and the Sharks by 24, but 6-point win against the Cowboys and a 1-point win against the Rabbitohs during that period. The Eels, they beat the Broncos last week. That was their 6th win on the season, but they have conceded 30 or more points in 4 of their last 6 games, and the only times they didn't concede the 30 points or more was against the Titans and the Brisbane Broncos. Storm should be winning. The Eels will have taken confidence out of that game last week, but I just can't see them being good enough to get over the line and beat the Storm. Melbourne, the number 1 attacking side against the 15th ranked Eels, and the Storm also a top 3 defense, and the Eels are bottom 3 defense. So statistically, Melbourne should win this game comfortably. We just want to make sure lineups look okay to be taking Melbourne, but it should be completely fine. The total is 48.5. 3 of the past 4 head-to-head have gone over. The Storm, 2 of their last 3 have gone over, and the Eels, 4 of their last 6 have gone over. So plenty of trends here favoring the overs, but once again, we got this situation with a home underdog, and games in this spot this year have all been going under the total. The Eels' defense last week against the Broncos was really good. They did well at shutting down Brisbane. Now, the Storm play a lot more structure than the Broncos do. Brisbane just throw it around a bit haphazardly half the time and try lots of trick plays, where the Storm are very routine with how they go about attacking, and I think the Eels may just struggle a little bit more. The Storm last week did let in plenty of points against the Roosters side, so they show up in that same kind of mindset where they're happy to play a shootout. Then we'll probably see this game go over, just based on recent form and also the points that we know Melbourne have in them. We're leaning towards the overs at the current number. I made a fair total for this game, 48, so it has gone up pretty much what I was expecting. However, with just the recent history and recent form of these teams, that's why I think we'll see more points than less. And if it is to go under, it likely goes very close, and I doubt we'll see less than 40 points. Warriors versus Dolphins. The Warriors, $1.75 favorites, minus 2.5. Back-to-back home games here for the Warriors, and the total is 45.5. Dolphins, they're off the bye, so they've had that little bit of extra rest coming in. The Warriors, they've won 3 of the 5 games against the Dolphins, and they've covered the spread in 4 of those 5 games. And interestingly, the past 3 head-to-head have all been decided by 4 or less. They last met in round 11 this season at Suncorp Stadium. The Warriors were 1.5-point favorites, $1.80, and won that game 16 points to 12. Looking through what happened there, it was fine conditions, so don't look at this and think, oh, well, there's only 28 points scored, and we know the Dolphins score the second most points of any team in the competition, and they only scored 12. The Warriors scored 2 tries in the first half and kept the Dolphins scoreless. At halftime, they led 10-0. And then just keep in mind also, it was almost 30 minutes into that game before Niokore got the first try of the match in the 28th minute. After halftime, there was another 29 minutes before the first try in the second half, and that came through the Warriors. That got them out to a 16-0 lead. Dolphins got 2 late tries, Tabuai-Fidow and then Herbie Farnworth scored whilst James Fisher-Harris was in the sin bin. But the Warriors were able to hold on and win by 4 points. Dolphins had more of the ball. The Warriors completed slightly better, but it was mostly even stats. There wasn't huge differentials between the meters gained. Both teams set distances fairly even. Tackle breaks and missed tackles, or even line breaks were even. Really wasn't a great deal between these two sides. But the one thing that likely cost the Dolphins the game here was their errors. 16 errors made by them and just 8 made by the Warriors. Penalties, once again, were fairly even. The Dolphins did benefit from plenty of set restarts, but ultimately the Warriors just were able to hold on by a 4-point margin. Since then, the Dolphins have obviously been in red hot form in majority of their games. If you go back through and look, since that game they lost to the Warriors, they then came out and beat the Bulldogs 44-8, the Dragons 56-6, the Cowboys 58-4, lost by 6 to the Knights over in Perth. Then they beat the Rabbitohs 50-28. They lost to the Sharks 12-24 and then beat the Cowboys 43-24. Now, the key thing here is the away game. So that game where they lost against the Sharks was away. The game they lost against the Knights was also a neutral venue. But then they beat the Cowboys away and the Bulldogs away. So the last 2 away games they've lost. The Warriors, they're coming off a loss last week against the Gold Coast Titans after beating the Knights and Tigers the week prior. I think that's a really disappointing loss for the Warriors and probably is going to end up costing them a spot in the top 4 and a double chance come finals. They still have a few easy games to end out the season, so there is the chance they hold on, but I think that one may end up proving really costly. But they're in a good spot here. They have back-to-back home games, but obviously the Dolphins, they're off the bye. If Dolphins can play how they play at Suncorp over in New Zealand, they're obviously a big chance of winning this game. Do think the market should just be slightly closer up between the two teams. Warriors, when you look at their form, they have lost 3 of their last 5 games, and those wins just being against the Knights and Tigers aren't anything to get too excited about. So I actually like the Dolphins as the underdog here. Warriors have also failed to cover the spread in 4 of their last 5, and the Dolphins, they've won and covered 5 of their last 7, and those losses that they have had, the one against the Knights is definitely the real concerning one, but no, not losing really any admirers. Losing to the Sharks, they were without Tabuai-Fidow for that game as well. The total is 45.5. 4 of the 5 meetings have gone under the total. The Warriors have had 3 of their last 4 go under, and with the Dolphins, when they win, it goes over. When they lose, it goes under. That's been the trend their last 7 games. So if you think the Dolphins are going to win, you lean it towards it being a higher scoring game. If you think the Warriors are going to win, then lean towards it being a lower scoring. That's going to kind of how it plays out most weeks for these sides. But just think, like, defensively, these sides are very even. Warriors ranked 4th defensively, Dolphins ranked 5th. Hardly anything between the two teams, but Dolphins are the much better attacking side. So I don't love, like, with the total at 45.5, it's 1 point lower than I was expecting it to be. Expected 46.5 here. And I know strong leans on the total, but I do like the Dolphins as the underdog. Broncos versus Rabbitohs. Brisbane, a 15.5 point favourites, $1.19, and the total is 48.5. The Rabbitohs have won the last 2 against the Broncos, but if you go back, the teams have split the last 8 meetings, 4 wins each. Broncos, though, have won 6 of the past 9 at home against the Rabbitohs, and the past 3 have all been decided by 10 points or less. They last met in round 10 this season down in New South Wales, with the Rabbitohs winning 22-14 as $3.70 outsiders. Looking at what happened there, the Rabbitohs winning that game by 8. There was a bit of rain around here, so that contributed to just their 36 points being scored. Broncos scored both of their tries in the first half, and they went into halftime leading 14 points to 0. But the Rabbitohs, they scored 3 tries and kept the Broncos scoreless in the second half to win and get up and win the game. Now, keep in mind, the scores were tied 14-all with 5 minutes to go. Latrell Mitchell kicked a 2-point field goal and then scored a try in the 79th minute right on the goal line when the game was just about over. So that's what contributed to that. Most of the stats for this game came through pretty even possession, completion rate, meters gained just in favor of the Broncos, but not a huge differential. Line breaks 9-3 in favor of Brisbane, and Brisbane also only just missed the 19 tackles. The Rabbitohs missing 29. No major differences between the errors and penalties either. So on paper, like, Brisbane should have won that game. When you have 6 additional line breaks and only miss 19 tackles as well, you should win the game, but they weren't able to get the job done. Brisbane, they lost to the Parramatta Eels at home last week. Thankfully, they're off the bye there as well, so really shouldn't have lost that game, particularly with the Eels on the quick turnaround after playing in Canberra the week prior. But Brisbane, they get the chance to atone from it with another home game here. Keep in mind, they do play the Melbourne Storm in Melbourne next Thursday night. So Brisbane definitely can't afford to drop that game, and I think that's definitely been baked into the price as well. Certainly wouldn't be laying 15.5 points here for them. The Rabbitohs, they hung around in the game against the Sharks last week. Sharks could have put it out over double digits with a try late in the game, but off that line break down the left edge, couldn't convert it into points. Rabbitohs came back, scored a late try, which brought the margin back to 2 points. Prior to that, they had lost 3 games in a row, all by 18 or more. This game, if they are lose here, will make it 9 consecutive losses. They have the Titans and Eels following this, so potentially some games where they'll give themselves a chance of winning. It'll be interesting to see what the markets do there. You can also, in the bet finders, through the link in the description, look at the trends for the upcoming games as well. So there's lots of different things you can do to be prepared for the upcoming games. But this matchup, Brisbane should win, but I wouldn't be touching the $1.19, that's for sure. Doubt Rabbitohs can get over the line and beat them. Broncos to win. The total is 48.5. This season, Rabbitohs have been a big under team. Their last 3 games have all gone under. There was just that little patch during the origin period where they had games going over, largely due to the fact they were conceding so many points. The Rabbitohs pretty much give up 24 points every single week. There's been very few exceptions of that. The Broncos, for them, they've had 4 games in a row go under. With that in mind, like, you have to be somewhat leaning towards the under with a total close to 50 points here. The Broncos, they're a little bit unpredictable. They can either play terribly and try and scrape out a close win, or they can run in plenty of points quickly. They have scored 20 plus in each of their last 6 games. So if they score 26 to 30 points here, what they average and what the Rabbitohs concede on average, then you're looking at the Rabbitohs needing to score 3 converted tries to get this to go over. So I'd be leaning just towards the under, but not with a huge amount of confidence. I think if it is to go under, it probably does go pretty close to what the current total is. For me, I make a fair total for this matchup at 45, so I do think it's a couple of points high, but you just have to factor in the chance that Brisbane will be so disappointed off their loss last week that they really want to come out and make a statement. Hasn't really been their pattern much this season. If you look through, they lost to the Raiders in round 2, back that up with a 10-point win, 26-16 over the Cowboys. When they lost to the Roosters, they lost again the week after to the Warriors, but then had that big win over the Bulldogs. They then went on a 4-game losing streak. After the loss to the Seagulls, they came out with a 30-point win against the Rabbitohs. I guess that's a similar situation here, but they are in the back-to-back home situation, so they're extremely well advantaged. The Titans versus Panthers. Penrith looking for 8 straight wins are $1.25 minus 12.5, and the total is 46.5. Penrith, they've won 10 of the last 11 against Gold Coast, including 6 straight. And the Titans have also lost 8 of their last 10 home games against Penrith. Last time they met was at Penrith in round 27 last season. The Panthers were $1.05 minus 16.5. Didn't cover, but won the game by 6 points. Looking through what happened there, Penrith went over very early. Brian Toho in the 6th minute. Jaden Campbell got the other try in the first half, so just 1 each, and the Titans led 6-4 at halftime. Panthers scored the first 2 tries shortly after halftime. That gave them that 16-6 lead. Titans got a late try there, and then a kicked penalty goal to push it back out to a 6-point margin, and the Panthers were able to hold on. There was no Nathan Cleary for this matchup, and obviously you're going back to last season as well. But the Panthers, they had 55% possession, even though they only completed at 68%, an extra 36 runs, close enough to 400 or just over 400 extra run meters and 140 extra post contact. Only the 3-2 line breaks, even though both teams missed over 30 tackles. Huge error game, 15 errors by Penrith, 16 by the Titans, and Penrith also won the penalty count 7-4. Absolutely expect Penrith to win this game. I really can't see them dropping it. Give Titans credit for their win over the Warriors last week. There's only been one occasion this season where the Gold Coast have won back-to-back games. They've won 5 games total. The only time they won back-to-back was round 3 and round 4 against the Knights and against the Roosters. But certainly can't see that happening again this week. Penrith are just so difficult to score against at the moment. This 7-game win streak they're on, they're only conceding 10 points per game on average. Only the Warriors have scored over 14 points against them, and you're asking the Gold Coast Titans, who rank 13th in attack, to try and run up enough score against this Panthers defenses. Can't see it happening. And I do think there is value in the Panthers at around this $1.25 price, to be fair. Particularly with the Titans returning from New Zealand off a win. I don't think they need to try and prove anything either with this game. You do see teams get up when they play the reigning premiers and the better teams. They at home as well. They try to make a statement, but just can't see that happening. Titans also the second worst defense. The Panthers are second best defense now. That average points they're conceding is coming down very sharply. Early in the season, Penrith were conceding more points than any other team. Now they've got it all the way back to a top 2 defense, which, as we know in the NRL, you basically need to be a top 2 defense to win the premiership. So now they're getting more so on par. They're ahead of the Storm, and now they're getting on par with the Bulldogs defensively. It's going to be very interesting over the next couple of months. So yeah, Penrith to win this game. One interesting thing, like with this handicap at minus 12.5, the Titans, their last 4 games have all been 12 or less margins. They've also led at halftime in their last 2 games. Prior to these last 2 games, they only led at halftime in 3 of 16 games through the whole season. So their first halves have definitely gone up a notch. They're playing better and not putting themselves out of the contest early. And so they'll probably try and do that again this week against Penrith, but the Panthers will just be that little bit too strong. In this 7-game win streak, the Panthers have also covered the spread in their last 5 games. So yeah, like Penrith to win this fairly comfortably. Be very surprised to see any other result. The total is 46.5. I make a fair total 45.5. The 4 of the past 6 head-to-head have gone under. The Titans' last 3 have all gone under, and the Panthers, 7 of their last 8 have gone under. I'd more so be looking at the Titans team total to go under as my first thoughts for this game. Doubt Gold Coast score over 18 points. Their total line is probably going to be about 15.5, maybe 14.5 here, which is starting to get very low. So you potentially look at some alternate lines. Can't see them scoring much more than that, particularly with the way this Panthers defensive form is currently in. Titans do generally get close to the 20 mark, but I don't see that happening in this game. If you look through 12, 14, 4, 12, and 14 are the last 5 times they've played against Penrith. They haven't scored over the 14 mark, and expect that continues again in this game. Similar to how the Panthers beat up on the Tigers last week. Dragons versus Raiders. The Raiders are favourites at $1.44, minus 6.5, and the total's 45.5. Raiders, they've won the past 5 in a row against St. George. But as the underdog, the Dragons have covered 4 of those 5 games, and the only time the Raiders covered was when they won as the underdog here, 26-24 in round 27 last season. They're plus 3.5. So they've been winning games, and they've been winning them as favourite as well, but not covering. A lot of these games being small margins. 12 of the past 14 have been decided by 10 points or less, including 8 games in a row. So this is very interesting considering where these teams are at. And Dragons have been doing well at keeping games to close margins. If we have a quick look through their recent form leading into this game, they lost to the Cowboys last week by 6, lost to the Bulldogs by 2, the Roosters by 7, and the Raiders by 4. That's their last month. This is going to be interesting whether they can hang around again against the Raiders. This time at home, they kept it to a 4-point margin back in round 18. Looking at what happened in that game to get a gist of it. So playing in Canberra on Saturday, the Raiders scored 2 tries to 1 in the first half. Savage and Weeks both scoring. Tyrell Sloan scoring for the Dragons. It was 12-6 at halftime, but typical kind of Raiders fashion, they held on in the second half. Quite a few games they've been able to dominate. This wasn't one of them. The Dragons running in 3 tries during this 15-minute period, trying to work their way back into the game, but weren't able to find the front. After these 4 tries here for the Raiders, they were leading this game 24 points to 6. And then those 3 tries by the Dragons. Statistically for this matchup, slightly more of the ball for the Raiders at 53%. They also completed at 84%. Probably should have won by more, considering the Dragons only completed at 67. Significantly more meters gained, 6-3 line breaks in favor of the Raiders, and they also only missed 18 tackles. And Dragons shot themselves in the foot a bit with the 14-9 error count. Raiders come into this game on a big winning streak. They've now won 9 straight. They go for the 10 in a row here. They've also only lost the 1 game all the way back to round 4. So it is very hard to see them losing this game, even though they're on the road here after 3 straight home games, actually. But I expect they get the job done. I'm not sure if I want to take the -6.5. Like, on first looks, when you look at these teams, you'd straight away think Raiders will win this game by more than that. But the Dragons, they have this habit of hanging around and just keeping games close. But I expect the Raiders to win. I think the better spot in this matchup is, like, with the handicap as well. The Raiders, they've won their past 2 games by a combined 50 points and didn't lead at halftime in either of those games. So there is a chance like the Dragons just can't quite keep up. They are also returning from the trip up to Townsville. So it's not an ideal situation. They do have the extra rest though, so that comes into their favor. But Raiders should win, and if they play like they have been, they probably cover the 6.5. But I did expect to see this handicap closer to the 10 mark, to be honest. And so I just want to look into this a little bit more as to why they've got this number lower. Potentially it feels a little bit trappy. So we'll see the lineups. But at the end of the day, like, Raiders, they go for 10 in a row, sitting on top of the ladder. Yeah, looks like a pretty straightforward bet at this stage. The total, I think, is the better play here. The total at 45.5. You've got 5 of the past 8 head-to-head going under. Not worried about that. There's nothing really there. The Dragons, 6 of their last 7 games have gone over. The Raiders, their last 3 games have gone over. It all sets up for there to be points here. The Raiders averaging almost 29 points per game. And the Dragons, poor defensively, they're bottom 4 defense. And also the Raiders, whilst yes, they're a good defensively, they're not great, and they still give up points. So I expect this game to sail over this 45.5 point mark. So really like the overs in that matchup. And we've been really riding these Dragons overs lately. And I think we get another good matchup again here. The Seagulls versus Roosters. Manly are $1.62 favorites, -3.5. And the total is 47.5. The Roosters, they've won 3 of the past 4 against the Seagulls. And the Seagulls, though, have won the past 2 home games against the Roosters. Historically, it's been close. 5 of the past 6 head-to-head have been decided by 10 or less. The one that wasn't was the one late last season in the semi-finals. The Roosters as $1.48 favourites, eliminating Manly 40 points to 16. Having a look at what happened in that game. Roosters, they scored 3 tries in the first half to get the game underway. Olakuatu scored just before halftime, which got the Seagulls on the board. It was a 20-4 scoreline going into the break. Daniel Tupou scored straight after halftime. Tedesco scored about 15 minutes later, and that margin quickly pushed out. A couple of late tries there for the Seagulls, got them up to the 16 points, but never really in the hunt, particularly when you add in all the penalty goals as well for the Roosters. 56% possession, 87% completion rate. You're never going to win a finals match with 64% that Manly had in that game. 8-2 line breaks, and the Roosters only missed the 19 tackles as well. So didn't really give the Seagulls much opportunity at all. Manly, also with their low completion rate, had 14 errors to just 6 by the Roosters. This was basically a perfect finals game by Sydney. Lots of line breaks, no errors, and Not many missed tackles either. And to go with their 19 missed, they only had 11 ineffective tackles as well. So they were over that 90% effective tackle percentage. Manly get their opportunity to get revenge on that. This is the first time meeting since then, but they are coming off their biggest loss of the season last week against the Bulldogs, where they lost 42 points to 4. Manly did win 3 straight prior to that, but other than the game against the Storm, they were against a couple of teams ranked low on the ladder in the Rabbitohs and West Tigers. So there is still question marks on the Seagulls' form. Roosters, they challenged the Storm right to the end. Last week, they were a chance of scoring to tie the game in the final play, but then threw the pass forward. That now means the Roosters have lost 3 of their last 4 games. So this, as I said, this is a really, really important game for both teams with where they're sitting on the ladder. Roosters, their games recently have been pretty close. A 4-point loss to the Storm, 13-point loss to the Sharks with that late field goal. It would have been a 12-point margin. 7-point win over the Dragons, 2-point loss against the Tigers. They beat up on the Cowboys 42-8. 4-point loss against the Knights, 2-point loss against the Raiders, beat up the Sharks by 26. And a 4-point loss against the Bulldogs. If you go back and look through the last 10 games by the Roosters, they have had 8 of those games decided by 13 points or less. And then if we look at Manly as well in their recent form, bad loss against the Bulldogs, 2-point win over the Storm, then 18-point wins over the Rabbitohs and Tigers. They haven't had as many close games, but this is one where I think it's going to be close between these two teams. There's not a great deal between them numbers-wise. The Seagulls are the better defense, Roosters are the better attack, but it evens each other out. And I think we're going to see a really close game with a lot on the line. I don't think either team can afford to take a backward step here. Both of them need the win, and can't afford it to be a blowout loss. There is that added motivation for the Seagulls. Don't really agree with them being $1.62 favourites. I think that's a bit of an overreaction, but they have won their last 2 at home against the Roosters, so you've got to factor that in a little bit, that home field advantage. But to be honest, I can't really have them under $1.80 here. We'll just see lineups coming in, but lean right now towards the Roosters as the underdog, but also think it's going to be a very close game. So I'll be looking at the try bets. The total at 47.5. Make a fair total 46.5, so it's pretty accurate to what I was expecting. 3 of the past 4 head-to-head have gone over. Obviously, last season it had 56 points scored in the finals. During the regular season, there was 64 points scored in the later game and 35 points in the game at 4 Pines Park, where this one will be played. So that was the one that did go under, and we've got a 6-point higher total this time than we had back then. The thing with the total in this game and looking at the trends, the Roosters, they've had 5 straight games go over. 10 of the last 12 have gone over the total too. The Seagulls, last week against the Bulldogs, with the Bulldogs scoring 42 points, that game went over. No real thanks to the Seagulls attack. But if you go back through the Seagulls, they've still only had 2 of their last 13 games go over the total. So they've been a huge under team all season long. The team who gets to play it on their terms wins. If we see a high scoring game, Roosters win. If we see a low scoring game, Seagulls winners. What I'm expecting. So you could also pair up those 2 different options with the way you want to go. As I don't see the Seagulls winning if it turns into the shootout. Melbourne were able to just get over the top of the Roosters last week in that game, which was a bit of a shootout. But generally, most other teams wouldn't have in that situation. And I obviously prefer that form line coming in. The issue with the Seagulls as well, in terms of taking the unders, which worries me a little bit, is the fact they gave up 42 points against the Bulldogs side, who had been having issues in attack going into that game, and then they just gave up so many easy points. And there was a couple of those tries which they really shouldn't have had conceded. So we'll see close to the game which way I end up wanting to play this. But right now, I think it'll be close, lean towards the Roosters. And if Roosters are to win, over. Seagulls are to win, unders. Tigers versus Bulldogs. The Bulldogs, $1.28 favourites, minus 11.5. They're coming off their biggest win of the season, just like the Seagulls are coming off their biggest loss. And the total is 43.5. The Bulldogs, they've won the past 3 against the Tigers. They haven't met since round 9 last season, with the Bulldogs winning by 8 points as a $1.24 favourite. Looking at what happened in that game, the Tigers scored the opening try, which came in the 15th minute mark. That was responded to by the Bulldogs through Kurt Mann, and then Tigers scored again before halftime, so they went into the break leading 14 points to 6. The Bulldogs, they got the only 2 tries in the second half. They weren't able to score whilst the Tigers had 2 players in the sin bin during that last 6 and 7 minutes. But they were able to hold on for an 8-point win and do it fairly comfortably in the end. They not only got the 2 converted tries, but also the 2 penalty goals in the second half. So outscored them 16 points to 0 in the second half. Bulldogs slightly more of the ball. Both teams completed in the high 80s percentages. Slightly more meters gained from only a few extra runs by the Bulldogs. Line breaks were tied for all, and there wasn't a huge amount of differential between these teams when you look through the statistics for the game. Both teams missing over the 30 tackles. Errors, Tigers made a couple more penalties, 7-6 in favour of the Bulldogs. So it wasn't huge differentials between the teams. Bulldogs obviously playing a lot better than the Tigers this season, expecting them to win the game and make it 4 straight wins against the West Tigers. The Tigers, they've lost 8 of their last 10 games, and their last 3 losses have all been by 18 or more points, and they've failed to cover, obviously, in all of those. The Bulldogs, they made it 3 wins in a row with that win over the Seagulls, and that was a season high 42 points last week. If they keep that attacking form going, then they'll likely cover the 11.5 here. But obviously, it's questionable whether they're able to do that, as they were having issues leading in. The Tigers defensively has started to drop away. They've given up 28 or more points in 4 of their last 5 games. So there's a strong chance here that the Bulldogs run in 30 points, which will go a very long way towards them covering this 11.5 point handicap. But just like the question you have to ask yourself in terms of Bulldogs covering is, can they replicate the performance that they did last week? There's not really any reason that they can't. This is an easier opposition, and it's just whether they treat it like that and just do enough to win, or they want to put on another performance like they did last week. For the Bulldogs, was their first cover and over in their last 6 games. They've been going under in a lot of those matches in close games. The Tigers, they've had 5 of their last 7 go under. The total here is 43.5. The 3 of the last 4 head-to-head have gone over the total. So I think for this game to go over, it's going to rely on the Bulldogs scoring that 30-plus points. If we see that, it'll go make a fair total 43 here, so I think it's pretty spot on. Slight lean towards, I think the Tigers will score 6 to 12 points. I don't think they're going to score much more than that. Very similar to the game last week against Penrith, who ran in 36 points against them. I think we'll see a pretty similar scoreline. I think Bulldogs are fairly on par with the Panthers right now, both in attack and defense. There's not much between them. And so the Tigers, back-to-back weeks of similar results, which lean towards the Bulldogs covering, and also the total looks pretty spot on, but slight lean towards the overs, but will depend on the Bulldogs attack. I'd rather play the Tigers team total to go under than be playing the full game overs, if that makes sense. And then the final game of the round, Sharks versus Cowboys. Cronulla at home, $1.42 minus 7.5, and the total is 48.5. The Sharks have an outstanding record against North Queensland. They've won 13 of the past 15, and they've also won 11 of the past 13 at home versus Cowboys. They met earlier this season in round 2 with the Sharks winning up in Townsville 36-12 as $1.35 favourites. Looking through, the Sharks scored the first 2 tries of that game. Jackson Purdue got the Cowboys' only try of the first half. Sam Stonestreet got his first as the last try before halftime, and the Sharks went into the break leading 16-6. After halftime, they went in and ran the first 3 tries of the second half. It took 17 minutes for the first one to come through, though, which this obviously pushed the margin right out. The Cowboys got a late try through Scott Drinkwater, and then Kale Iro got a late try there in the 78th minute. The Sharks pretty much all the ball, 56%. They completed 83%. An extra 450 run meters, more than an extra 100 post contact, and the big one, 10-2 line breaks from the 37 missed tackles by the Cowboys. We'll also check how many ineffective ones they had. Just the 10 ineffective. So that wasn't too bad, but 37 missed overall. Sharks, 11-9 errors. Not a huge difference, and penalties were 7 all. Sharks did have 6 set restarts to 1 in their favour. This game, really can't see Cronulla losing at home. They are the better attack and better defense, and it's obviously an important game for them. Cowboys can't make finals, so they're just playing for pride right now, and Sharks definitely need to make sure that they win this game at home. They have a pretty easy run home. Following this, they have the Dragons, Titans, the bye, then Knights and Bulldogs to end the year. So they can go on a 7-game win streak heading into that last round game against the Bulldogs, and it should mean that game won't matter too much for them compared to if they are to drop games here against the Cowboys or the Dragons or the Titans coming up. So I like the Sharks to win. I rarely ever like backing the Sharks to win by a certain margin, so I'm not super keen on playing the handicap. The Cowboys, they come into this game with the win over the Dragons last week, but did give up 32 points. They have conceded 75 across their last 2 games against the Dragons and Dolphins. So if the Sharks want to, they can run in points here. Like, Cowboys haven't really been able to stop many teams. The only team that struggled to score against them since basically round 8, which was the Titans, the only team that couldn't find at least 24 points was the Bulldogs. There should be no issue for the Sharks here not to run in 30 points or more like they did with the 36 earlier this season, and they're at home this time around. Sharks, like all things being equal, Sharks should win this game comfortably. They just need to play somewhere near their best. But they haven't been great at covering, but I think that's maybe helping us get a little bit of a better handicap this time. They've only covered 2 of their last 8, whereas the Cowboys, they've covered 4 of their last 5, but only won 2 of their last 8, and those wins against Dragons and Titans. So Sharks to win and win the game comfortably. The total is 48.5. It's a pretty high number. So this number suggests that the Sharks will run up a score here. So I'd be looking at the Cowboys team total to go under, first of all, with these numbers in mind. Sharks defense has been good. They were able to limit in their last 3 games as well. Teams haven't been scoring against them. 12 by the Rabbitohs, and that was in the away game. And then their 2 home games only conceded 18 against the Roosters and 12 against the Dolphins. Really good defensive performances. They should be able to shut down the Cowboys here. And if they keep the Cowboys to 20 points here, based off of what the current handicap is and what the current total is, the Cowboys team total should be around the 20-point mark here, which I can't see them scoring more than that against the Sharks. I do like that as a strong bet potentially to end the round. So that's how I'm looking at playing this week's NRL games and how I'm approaching betting on them. Hopefully you found this video insightful. If you want to see all my final bets and use the bet finders, that's all in the link in the description to check that out. Really appreciate you guys watching and following along on the investor.bet channel. Stay tuned for the try score preview.